Hello, YouTubers. My name is Anthony Wall. There are Wethersfield police. There are ones named Mendez who are involved. The older one reportedly has a brother named Eric Mendez, and they are brothers. I heard his name was Janito. That's not what he put on a falsified police report, which was a hyper additional falsified police report. I never had a word of conversation with him ever in my life. He's one of the people that was above my grade, with people above my grade and below my grade, and in my grade, who weren't ever even in classes I had. Increasingly with people tied to the Wethersfield police chiefs retired, and their family members and intimate ties, and various natures of federal criminals associated with and as co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in a 2006 district court case in Connecticut. There are increasingly people next to Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, and next to Channel 3 News in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, and next to WTNH in New Haven, Connecticut, recorded, confess, demonstrate, and confirm things, and they're pretending others simultaneously relative to where and how they recorded themselves since founding. Forgiveness slash hyper non-forgive slash non-forgiveness rather. No, forgiveness is because they're also being and have been used remotely since they were kids. It is recorded. People from my teachers and kids and adults and kids on and off campus when I was a kid. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with various natures of organized crimes. But there were also impositions they didn't want to put the things in the database. That's why I never got suspended. A whole bunch of they would have people go into the principal's office, and then they would call me into the principal's office and say things that put me fake ties, fake nature of ties to kids, which is a sum of it. Then you go back to class. Also, they do that so when you're going to be walking, it's not just against me. I saw them doing it again against other kids. It's how we are exploited as a volume, for example, relative to where and to how they've made what's complicated about computers and what's simultaneously simple about them. They haven't spoken about tactical terror from how they need to by nature. And we have black pupils, whites of eye, so we're going to need to discern. We're going to have to use phrases like criminal insidiousness, criminally foreign influence, slash hyper criminally foreign influence. I'm not even a lawyer. The names, I'm an expert on the nature of English grammar and on communications. How are you? Hello. So Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid and as an adult. The only reason I know they did it as a kid is because they pretended that with the news too. Channel 3 News, New England News, they attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. They attached me as a fake ties to with doctors that weren't at all as a kid, mental doctors too. Ones with their kids involved with, I caught them with a proven child abuser principle of kids involved with a whole bunch of other ones before that. And they forced that. And it was also with Sandy Hook, and they have a prison there. And that prison had collusions with their patients and criminals forced. Since before they were caught, they had collusions with the crime scenes, including of a serial killer in that prison and body dumping spots that are increasingly involved with a Phil Cololo. People directly and indirectly involved with a Phil Cololo have also, there's a Fatima and other leasing agents, intercities, involved with various agencies in foreign and domestic military before the World Trade Center attack. Connecticut intercampuses and intra-campuses. They had collusion /S with what nobody wanted collusions with originally and still, except for the exceptions, like where and how. If you try to use how we have black people's whites of eyes, anyone who tries to use that properly for correlation by nature with syntax and appreciation of principles treatments, value treatments, nature treatments with syntax, therefore with function, that can't be discerned. They can't afford to have unobstructed speech at locations, let alone online, where we can take our time and all work together and for us a quality of fact-treating nature that is hyper positive. And nature shows us to discern that there is a hyper-positive distinct from positive alone, because criminal insidious natures of positive, like peace, criminal insidious natures of peace, were propagated only known. And then modern religious messengers were born, more probably, more properly to speak about it too. In other words, this is a hyperforum that showed the campuses A through Z in America how to speak for what it did, leaving itself out. And it knew that nature would demonstrate that too. It knew that nature would be demonstrating to all humanity. One of the things that history is about in every modern country is about how while each modern country was founded and was being founded, there was forced entrenched a hyperforeign breaching method, that which had slavery rolls with even more than 13 colonies and more than one country involved with it, even with slavery, while there were laws against all women, while there were laws against all native difference, therefore use of the word, including the words black and white. We have black pupils, whites of eyes. We have nature communicating things to us. We have sharks. We show them pictures on the internet of sharks, even if we haven't seen them in real life. In other words, God help you if you see a shark's eyes in real life, but black pupils, whites of eyes. We have two eyes. Nature is showing us that there are two sexes. Nature is showing us that there are things that it reveals. It's showing us what it's generating as individuals, species bodies, distinct individual species bodies of individual bodies. And it is generating all group differences. Nature's individual complete identity. Or it shows us we are using or have used. In the moment, we will be using systems of bridge, which that's all people are capable of fathoming with syntax regarding the future. Therefore, function /s. We could change the nature of debate. For the leaders of countries A through Z as individuals, you have to understand how individuals are preventing free speech. How they change it. In other words, they force equality of fact treatment nature outside of courts or outside of police treatments, executive or legislative. At the state capital of Connecticut and next to it are a bunch of people who do and say things to act so others can film where and how recorded since founding. It is recorded how all ages and natures of investigators, and things that we need them for. The only thing there, not by accident. The differences of their guilt, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, hundreds of countries shared, international companies, the same way originally and still. When did the breaching method stop having roles? See, America's founders wrote American history with they declassified stuff to surface, to be amended to what they said, like James Madison. He declassified, they had amended to amend to what he said. The plural founders, too. The plural founders directed us to understand that. That and why and how we're only supposed to entertain James Madison pretended to be a founder. Because they were using his plan, which would have had to force everyone to be at the Constitutional Convention. If you say, oh, how's that freedom? They had slavery, they had to leave slavery entrenched. They also explained that. Why and how they wanted nothing to do with slavery. But why and how they had all these sick affronts on everyone. If you spoke up about inside of or tried to go against them outside of internationally monitored conversations that were sickly roles with them, or outside the sense and sensibilities of internationally monitored conversations. Of internationally, criminal enterprises, in the sense and sensibilities, therefore, terrorists Originally, still, then America's founders were born. Already more than 13 colonies, northern colonies and colonies, only permitted was roles even with slavery. It was to make no nature of unity being capable, no nature of independence being capable. And nature forces that to be simultaneously valued. If anyone's going to speak for the Constitution on a bridge, the Republic on a bridge, democracy, the campuses. Bunch of people will tell you this too. Central Connecticut State University, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed, had a bunch of people directly and indirectly involved with people with predicate acts on my street from other areas, and the people ongoing involved with the child abusers, and further with the principal child abusers' confessions and confirmations to me what I caught them doing, using the rights to lie where they don't have the right to lie, including individually grouped and together the branches of government use remotely that way. The difference of it, like with the syntax of a James Comey, is involved collusions with a bunch of people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, Robert Chevrolet. A bunch of people with ties to locations tied to him and all other natures of conjunctions to him and to that, including the state capitol and names next to it. There's a Czech Casper I never saw on my campuses in my life. One time I confirmed, I didn't even see because I wanted to get in trouble. He has roles with people with the state judicial branch offices and with people named Potter. He was told to tell lies. No, I had nothing. The Potter family, they're being lied to about me since I was a kid. Mike Pandolf, too, has roles with the intelligence community with all sides of criminal and civil cases for us, though, too. Since there are all kinds of wire crime acts and methods. They have roles all along Route 3, conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices. They have remote uses of the sense and sensibilities of Judge Napolitano since before he was on YouTube. These are also people that brought his name up on YouTube, like the only Ron. He had more than one account too, and they start playing games with officers' names on social media as ones that were recorded further with the court too, with rape threats. Before I caught them with more with the principal upskirt nature, worse. Before that was part of them forcing it. They have more people involved with that. You have a bunch of fake tough guys too. I never had a word of conversation in my life with I forgot his name even. People tied to a Jonathan Maiano. He sought me out to make confessions in 1994. They needed to pretend I knew him before that. He sought me out to make confessions the day I was going to take the bus because my car was broken. How would he even know that? That's one of the ways he made confessions. For example, Judge Napolitano, we're speaking about communications here. Therefore, you can switching names here if you can hear me. If you can't, you guys should fear God for blocking and changing what I communicated to Judge Napolitano. Because this is with Fox News too. They're using wire crime acts and methods. They put fake in digital crimes. They fake digital evidences with whiting forensics. Increasingly, there are people named Lee Gold and Debbie Gold was brought up by people at Whiting Forensics in confessions. Also with Bob Chase's confessions regarding a Phil Cololo, who's further involved with people with confessions involved with abuses of kids. Also between campuses through time and next to them. Planting evidences, fake ties, fake nature ties to the kids' collusion/s. These are also with medical and sexual offenders of kids. There's a Leahy family that has little girls and their kids. She sought me out on Facebook to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm that. The Leahy family also faked through the mail that they spoke with me. They have a Lombardo family and a Leahy family that affected confessions on my street from kids from my grammar school said were in other classrooms putting fake ties, fake nature ties to me. Same house/s involved with multiple police departments with them. Intercities, time collusions, uses of the corners of, town lines. This is where and how there's a certain type of victim/hyper victim, where it is nature itself is showing us the increasing value of the three branches of government and the exceptions like intelligence. That country's A through Z. But how could they speak for that? Even if they tried to start doing speaking for it right, they get hurt for it. And the precedents in statute relative to that, many ways, it was mostly set up by the breaching method that designed the suburbs, designed houses, but there were houses still standing that were from before America's founders were born, and the ground was tactically denatured to make negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while being a landscape theater too, more and more incapable even of discerning it because they have been value nature systems tacticalitarian, reliant upon things, means, needs, Boolean logic, entertain. Or that person say you can't start worrying about details. In other words, there's a nature of debate that had no right to frame our founders for slavery, except for how they were child abused at campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly / non-distinctly. The breaching method uses functionally how it is self-valued, collusion / S, relative to the sickly distinctly part. How campuses sickly distinctly have replaced what James Madison communicated. They have replaced the human fact-checking nature breaching method right as a value right from the actual value of communications of James Madison declassified. So, in other words, the names of the people of the sciences have been using their knowledge of good and evil to get over on us. And then, and relative to readings of statutes and precedents, they couldn't get away with the readings of it if people even knew. On the last section, they're leaving out exception nature, of tactically using a tacticalitarian from how nature uses it, as it. Nature is all things, even if you make them up. Art, for example, has the order of the finite, has the difference of, and the value of the difference of the order of the finite or the smallest finite detail, or the grouped and active, further distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously / simultaneously itself, or the simultaneous. And for example, this is not complicated. It's just extensive. English was revealed to be taught this way. Alpha and omega. That's why alpha is in the word alphabet. I never heard anyone say that. But then omega would be O. And it comes right after M. Right after M with N between it. And M is O, because M is mother. And mother is omega in physics. Wherever omega or alpha is in physics, the opposite is because this is about three identities of relationship to itself. Nature's complete identity has. Even if you make something up, good or bad, nature is it. See, we could all even agree and call that positive relative to war to be. I mean, I want to make them relative to war. That would be positive. I mean, in other words, there's a difference between criminal and citizen's natures of positive and positive. And a breaching method abused names A through Z, then further as countries A through Z. And as a use of location / S that no one fathomed. Then further with database relativity / S to everything in one, since before computers, that no one fathomed, even though people could fathom it. So then when they bring it up to them, they're looking at that, or thinking about that. But no one's fathoming the hyper invisible, but still discernible, not just nature's identity, but that mimic of nature. Right there, relative, where other things, others ourselves, are forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed. Right where and how nature itself and James Madison told us to communicate it for us to blame a breaching method. For example, the one that left our founders without the security to let us know their names. And so they had us that declassified for us to understand that. But no one was allowed to speak about that or bring it up where it was inseparable from subjects. It stayed separable. And the breaching method knew and knows how nature works. In other words, all stupid jerks pretending not anyway, even though that's all was allowed to be. So the nature of debate, how this has gotten away with, there are things recorded that we could heal. In other words, campuses A through Z are sickly, distinctly victims / hyper victims, victim predator / hyper predator, reaction, non-reaction, the difference of that, the way the breaching method knew they would be at countries A through Z. In other words, and I apologize because I called all the presidents' names before. Not really Trump. In other words, because all those guys, the reason why, after the World Trade Center attack, I mean, it didn't really do it then when I was a kid and stuff like that, because there are people involved with the identities of the law, with identities of sophistication, that can't defend that and afford to have discern what is discernible by people. And so the breaching method measures and maintains that. It measures and maintains other things, others or self. Self-value roles, other things, others or selves. Blame right where and how when you were kids. You knew that you had black people's rights of eyes. You knew that there wasn't freedom because there was a breaching method that reassigned that. But so you didn't have it. If you understood and love America properly, you're supposed to blame it on the breaching method. Otherwise, America, you're just loving it because you're there. A breaching method was as entrenched, not even debatable. People get away with debating it, and that's right where and how we can discern. The only reason that's gotten away with is because people have self-value use /s already and actively of principles of fact-shaping nature, qualities of fact-shaping, quality of fact-shaping, the aspect of fact-shaping nature as criminal insidiousness nature / hyper-criminal insidiousness nature. I'm not a lawyer, no. Lawyers will jump in and help us. So we need to make a YouTube ground video together as a human species body plan /s. And how we could get, then we could negotiate. Then we could do things like it's one thing if a president does an executive order, but it's another thing if a president does an executive order in the judicial branch and the congressional, the legislative branch and countries A through Z, 3 branches of government, and we're on the same plan. We're paying attention to, even if it's no longer standing, a hyper-archetypal breaching method. To an extent, it's discernibly standing. If it's just in nature, because it showed all the identities of integrity to be that they were and how they were in our styles by nature itself forced. Needed to styles, all kinds of different people needed to force blamed other things, others ourselves for things that we're supposed to blame in the breaching method. What caused slavery? A human fact-shaping nature breaching method. What caused people to collude, leaving entertained laws against all women? A human fact-shaping nature breaching method. What in other words, and then once you sustain that, what made them hurt the Native Americans? Already the people that came over had already been themselves sickly replaced, put in forms of the republic for which we stand, that were no longer its system revealed before sciences became forced entertained. There are proofs. Tricked, hurt, and persuaded. Appreciated criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence through and as systems tactical ulterior, from the human species, individual species body of individual bodies. For that system as nature's complete identity, generating all group differences, not just the ones we could see manifest in physics, like two eyes, two sexes. Where and how people pretend things are debatable, and where and how we're supposed to explain that James Madison explained about those internationally monitored conversations, about the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, the international companies, all natures of news and communications at the same time with the same sequence shifts, the same relative delusions, the same relative collusion slash S, collusion singular with the, and then further hyper singular, collusion just with all humanity voicings. Humanity's syntax and function, if it's not going by nature's lead and method of communications with us. Nature's demonstrating a special difference is forced from here. As forced, a special difference transfer, force space nature transfer. Nature being a name hyper additionally for identity. Black pupils. So please, if someone could get Judge Napolitano to get them on paper, Connecticut to branch. New Britain Superior Court has a bunch of people involved with town lines, intercities, and with campuses, involved with predicate acts, also with mayors and other natures involved with the so this is not against John Congressman Larson. There was a security guard, and the timing of it, right there. I went outside. They told someone or something influenced me to go outside, and Guy Dinavelis jumped over a fence, and there was a security guard there, and he went running towards Fred Griset's house. Fred Griset is increasingly involved, and with Guy Dinavelis. I don't know why Guy Dinavelis. I swear to God, I know they're trying to do that. And there was a security guard. I didn't even know his name, like named John. That's all I know. He said his name was John, an old man. And that was when I was in the algebra class. And Anthony Yagman is increasingly involved with them, with people with a Perone family, and a John Maiano, and their neighbors, and people involved with that who also have roles with Coach Hagenbar. I never had a personal conversation with Coach Hagenbar ever. And these other coaches, these are people that are putting fake things in databases, and they're trying to start fights between the people through time. Increasingly with a mayor, a former mayor Gold, I never had a word of conversation with him. Him 2 times, and his daughter 1 time, verbally. Him 2 times non-verbally. He was trying to plant evidences at the side of the park with a Joe Aiello, and then Joe Aiello has further federal evidences crimes and child abusers, ties to child abusers involved, and with a whole bunch of different countries and people next to Harvard Hospital involved too. There's a Delafair family with a probate court judge in their family, and they have roles with fire departments, involved with intelligence agencies, foreign and domestic, who have been putting fake things in databases and acting tied to it. And in other words, and these are people also pretend we're speaking about guilt. Oh, but that's what you're just saying, it's about guilt. In other words, there are other countries involved. These are people involved with Channel 3 News attached to fake conversations with themselves. They have a bunch of people on Route 3, conjunctions to it and to that, like the state judicial branch offices in Wethersfield, and Route 175 from the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, like the Witch Trials place next to Webb House with now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. Then and now, just like founding locations across the country, other is communicated for them. Then our founders left to be communicated about those founding locations. We're supposed to understand the reason that George Washington had to meet with the French general there is because he was forced with everyone else to use the plan of James Madison, which no one had, because no one wanted rules with slavery. That's demonstrable, just per nature itself. Even though George Washington apparently didn't delineate that the way James Madison did. James Madison explained why and how nobody had free speech and everyone had to pretend others to an extent because it was tested. Otherwise, that body was sensed and it was adapted to, including if it was a majority of people, including if it was everyone. Every modern country had this breaching method entrenched, and it uses and used the voices of the groupings of nations. Any grouping of nations that knew it would be even further incapable of speaking for humanity properly, even further incapable of speaking for the Constitution, the Republic unabridged, let alone the Constitution, let alone them together at the same time, about the same hyper additional nature they are about, which is nature's complete identity relationship to itself, the extent we can discern it, which is variable, but it comes with its complete identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. So we can give a means and agreements. The whole species body, all these countries will help the countries with the nuclear weapons and technology threats and things like that, while at the same time, it's not just it's why and how it's not just they need money and things like that. Those are debate. The suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature with the suburbs. Space means will come out of nowhere. I'll donate to a plan. Like a business that will be owned by everyone. So just we could do, in other words, and use standing infrastructure like the cities where they have people stacking in New York City. We have to make space means come out of nowhere. And see, we can make people will do this. People will jump in and help. And this is with the YouTube video. We'll just make it about that, and people will understand. Then all of a sudden, especially then, like space means will come out, even for temporary, for the breathe. And sometimes, people are fluxing out. And all the tasks, we're going to consolidate the tasks, like with the education. But this is going to reveal, as any proper would have, unobstructed free speech would have already, abridgments to the Constitution that we only had to address, and it reveals means. It changes the nature of debates because it reveals natures of means. Because we're going to have to do that, because we're going to have to take away means while at the same time everyone's reliant upon systems and jobs on mass scale. No one can grow food. In other words, we're supposed to address, with some ways about Madison I teach best. Not even, no, but we could change this. Then we could access the potentials of good people, the retired and standing into branch, but at the same time still use remotely evil. They even have the people tied to them, putting fake conversations about that too with people about good and evil, because the breaching method showed the names of the people, the scientists, to use a phrase from the Old Testament, for example. They need to keep. They need to use their knowledge of good and evil, for example, to use another phrase from it, to get over on the identity of correlation nature. We are. See, the names of the people of sciences, the names of the people of differences, like the names of the people of the religion of Catholicism, Christianity. I never even heard of a Catholic or any other type of Christian speak about the first part of the Old Testament that says all that matters. And it says, no, it says the only thing. It says only defend right here. That's what it's only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together in the part that comes before it. And that is before the part with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Notice. and it is recorded that people can't be honest about that. The first part where it says only depend right here, or the part with the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, or the difference between that. And they want to pretend that they had a debate legitimate about anything yet. And this is relative to because each of the religions have voices that have criminally foreign influence slash tactically delusions wrought. Summaries of principal treatments by that while pretending passions and emotions. And even if they can't discern that, in other words, in the way, many pray. So Hartford Hospital has a bunch of people that attach me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. And they have digital crimes and wire and mail crimes. They did this through the mail too. And these are people involved also in intra-cities and intra-states. Two speech class teachers I have and have had collusion slash yes. I did a speech about it. People from Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, have collusions with people next to Hartford Hospital with a Chris Walters and a reported prostitute. I didn't look down to see if they were. I looked through the mirror and it looked like he was getting, what they call head or whatever like that. One time, he has something to do with the people with the foreign and domestic intelligence involved with the World Trade Center attack. And he has roles with people further with the child abusers, leaders of kids years apart, with the intelligence families near me, and intercities with people with the name Bobby, male and female through time. And I only know Chris Walter seeking me out to make confessions. There are also people with the name Lombardo involved with them with drugs and untimely deaths roles per others that brought it up with the principal child abusers campus to me first. WTNH has people named O'Neill who put fake ties to me, also with Whiting Forensics. And these are also people with Sandy Hook campuses, including a prison there, involved with a whole bunch of other countries and drugs and medicines crimes, including with the people with they're forcing medical treatments on people and things like that to keep their mouth shut, where they have roles with crimes with those patients and criminals and their family members and people in places tied to them before they were caught. They're using it to hide lipoaggressions, like the people next to the serial killer body dumping spot are increasingly involved with people with the name Colo and Demoro, who planted evidences tied to that with people by screaming something. I don't know. In other words, I didn't even have classes with them, and when I did have a class with Ray Colo, they tried to make a fake exception with an eighth grade class. Joe DeMoro and others have a Mr. Neville who repeated to our class demonstration confirmations. He has roles along Route 3. And people like we're in Omni. I was like some kind of children place there now too, which you gotta watch because it's from off the children places, but it keeps hyper additional collusion slash S at all ages and natures of campuses, including fire and medical campuses. There are families with fire departments that the FBI has people named like Demaro, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, also with the name Grohl. And who said that there's Joshua Stryker. Joshua Stryker is increasingly brought up by confessions to people that are making it look. Then they're walking away, make it look like I know them. People who time we're going to be, like a Robert Rodriguez, is increasingly collusions with a Mendez police, and one's named Demoro, who have roles of home break-ins in my area, per the Demoro, who have other federal evidences crimes with them, and the FBI director Robert Lusk and his co-defendants and their family members. There's a Dawn LeConte. I never had a word of conversation with her. She increasingly involved with people with sexual and medical offenders of kids, including increasingly people involved with the World Trade Center attack. And I never saw her on the inside of a campus in my life, Dawn LeConte. And her, as a lawyer of her father, is increasingly involved too with the spots next to locations tied to him too, and conjunctive to him. And so they're leaking this map. They're forcing. So they're doing that. They're like fishing, criminally fishing, Phishing, criminally phishing, because they're covering up how the breaching method shows them they need to. All sides of criminal and civil cases. There's a Brian Silver who's involved with the British Superior Court with a bunch of people from Wethersfield and also with this Leahy family with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and predicate acts on and off and between campuses, and then planting evidences, collusions on all sides of people's houses, and interbranch forge and switch names and won't go on to paper, and they've been stacking fake things as collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists now too. Get me off the fake conversations at the Wethersfield Police Department with these Mendes police and whoever they pretended I had conversation with. I didn't have one word. We didn't even ask me anything. Didn't say anything to the guy when I was arrested when I was in an algebra class that same year. After they hid what I recorded them doing too, with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and people with private schools and public schools, planting evidence on my street, fake ties, fake nature ties to me with this O'Brien family and a Colo family and others with the multiple police departments and the people from the other areas involved with the home break-ins who have direct ties to them, like the Demorrow. And this is also wire crimes of the Wethersfield police, and the FBI and the other agencies. Kelly Kazmarek, the only reason I know how to say her name, I never met her and saw her around, never had, only on Facebook. She's trying to make it look like other. Increasingly, Eric Jensen. These are people that work for, there are proofs that they work for the branches of government with Washington, D.C., tied to elderly homes, tied to the corrections offices, judicial branch offices, people that were used remotely. Wethersfield Pizza House, too. Central Connecticut State University has kids and adults that recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Stephen Sacco is involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders with them against me, with putting fake things in databases for strict term persuaded to them. And his roles also with people on off Hangdog Lane and 2 Rail Highway in conjunctions to it and to that, like Route 3 in the state judicial branch offices, in the Elm Street corners in Rocky Hill and Wethersfield. Eric Oliveri, too. I only know him seeking me out to plant evidences and confessions years apart with the people involved with falsified police reports and collusions with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and child abusers, leaders of kids before I was born, when I was a little kid, the one I caught as an adult, with more then and now. And there are more then and now. And it's also how they keep good people evil, because you guys are forcing people to speak through others. You are forcing collusion, self-value, with people using and having used the right to lie for 6 things where they don't have the right to lie. You have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and precedents in the value of all exceptions, even when there are exceptions. This is why and how the suburbs still look the way they were, designed since before America's founders were born, by a breaching method capable of using us remotely from abroad, even though by having so many things that no one wanted collusions with, but they had no choice, having been sustained so long, no one could fathom a way out. This is the way. It's all mandated law. Get me off of fake conversations with Channel 3 News. And this is a torture method, too, no. Because the intelligence community had roles with torture before the World Trade Center attack, relative to when how the attack was effectively pulled off to keep remote uses hyper foreign of locations, areas, and states, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, and pretending other, the way it needs them to, as styles that can't defend that and afford to be, let alone to protract short words properly by our republic, by the Constitution unabridged, black pupils, period, who disbelieves. So this will change the nature of everything. But we have to understand why, how even the most powerful leaders, they're changing and wiping away their. They'll say that's why the president keeps repeating they emptied their prisons and their mental institutions. A whole bunch of patients. There's a patient at Hartford Hospital, and their doctors who have collusions with houses near me, named Colo and Smith, per the confessions of the police. And they're the ones starting the problems. Then they're trying to make sequence shifts. These are people inter-cities and intra-cities, and further with the Wethersfield town offices too. And then they have people involved with the communications too, and the locations of it. And they should unblock the posts for the town meeting. In other words, you have all kinds of sick collusions now with a Michael Emmett, and you guys hid that, and with a retired police chief Cintron, and his people say, and his sources, they were confessing that there's a Mazzucato bakery since before they were there, and where they used to be. And the same people, were court express, demonstrate, confirmed, they've been spreading lies about me since they were kids to Modern Pastry behind my back. I never had a class with them. And with a former Mayor Gold. Many people tied to a Mayor Gold have been planning federal evidence of crimes, organized crime bodies with the kids too, at the side entrances to parks. So you're gonna get Whiting forensics too, Judge Napolitano. Have to fix the fake news, please. And the military too. They have military involved. Get them on paper, and don't make them pretend it's disrespectful to the military. They should fear God to hide and plot. They heard I don't understand what I said. Get me a response. Oh, well, I didn't know. Then why you speak? No words. Play games.